listening to the TMB podcast, brought to you by Book World.
What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the TMB podcast. I'm your host, Brian Dawkins, aka That Man Bdawk, and we're joining you on a Sunday fun day. You know, chilling. It's been a stressful week to say the least. So apologies if the energy is off. My wife and I are getting the fence redone, and the process, it just hasn't been the smoothest. The fence looks good. They've done a good job, but some of the other back and forth and things haven't been the best. And it's partially my fault, so I can't even be upset at anybody but myself. But looking forward to discussing just a few topics I jotted down over this week. Also, want to take the opportunity to plug the Mook World Mookcast. Mateo and I, Blaze Acuno is his name. We recorded an episode, so definitely check that out too. Like I said before, the guys and I in Mook World, that podcast is not going away just because I have this one. This one is just for me to kind of talk and have my inner monologues or guests on. So please, if you get an opportunity, I'll try to have that one linked down in the description for this one too. But check that one out as well if you're enjoying this podcast. But let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, PlayStation considering price hikes to cover the Trump tariffs. So in an earnings report, I believe it was an earnings call, you know, some of the CFO, the hires of PlayStation were discussing the impact that the tariffs will have on PlayStation over this next fiscal year. I believe it was to the tune, I jotted it down, of $680 million, which is nothing to bat an eye at. So because of that, there's a couple things. They were considering moving their manufacturing to the U.S. or raising prices and passing it along to us as the consumer. Obviously, I think that's going to be the approach they take, passing that price down to the consumer. Unfortunately, I don't see them moving their manufacturing here for one big reason, in my opinion, is as much as the tariffs are impacting and raising prices, or potentially doing that, since there's still a lot of back and forth about the percentages and things like that, is it worth uprooting your operation wherever it is to move somewhere else, spend the billions of dollars, because I'm sure it's going to be in the billions, to move your operation to the U.S. when in 4 years these tariffs might not be a thing? You know, maybe after this current administration leaves and whoever takes over next doesn't feel that strongly or the same way about the tariffs after seeing how it, you know, plays out over this next 4 years. Maybe they change it or they negotiate it to be lower, and then the impact is not as crucial as it would be in this time. And I think you kind of wait it out. Obviously in 4 years, or in not even in 4 years, in a year or two, if it's really looking like the tariffs are going to be around for a significant time, like it's not just going to be a 4 years and then somebody else comes and undoes it, or, you know, he doesn't adjust the tariffs in this amount of time, then maybe take the consideration to moving it to the U.S. seriously. But I just don't see right now why they would kind of uproot things when, especially for PlayStation, a large portion of their customers and player base is not in the U.S. anyway. So, interesting enough, I also believe with the price increases, and this is just a hot take, and mainly we talked about this on the Mook World Mookcast too, but I wanted to spin this point as something to talk about here, just something I've been thinking about since that, and just in general overall. And this might be a hot take, but not really. I think PlayStation should look at this situation and really consider biting the bullet. I know it sounds crazy. 680 mil, not a small number. Very much not a small number. But I think you can take this opportunity to build some good faith. You know, we've seen Nintendo talk about their prices for the Switch 2, talk about the $80 games. $80 game right now. I guess it's Mario Kart World. I believe the Kirby Air Ride is $80 too. But the trend is that some of their more popular IPs are going to be in that $80 range. We've also seen Xbox announce price increases on their end too, with their consoles, their headsets and stuff like that. And then also they announced that starting in holiday season this year, some of their first party output games are going to be at $80 too. I think PlayStation has a rare opportunity because usually they're the ones, raising prices or doing things that are kind of anti-consumer to hold steady. I'm not saying lower prices or try to, be too generous, because obviously you're a corporation, you're trying to make money. But I do think there's an opportunity to just wait it out and see. You got a couple releases coming up. You got Ghost of Yote, you got Lost Soul Aside, even though, you're publishing that game, you're not developing it. I would imagine there's some other things in the work, maybe some smaller projects, maybe not. You got Ceros coming next year. I would wait it out and take a moment as the lowest costing from a game standpoint, not the console. They've already raised the price on the consoles a little bit, but keep yours at $70 and just see what the general reception is. Obviously, if you already have price increases and things like that in the works, I'm sure they're gonna go ahead and move forward with it. And I don't run a billion-dollar corporation. I've said this on other episodes of this podcast, but I do think they're in a unique position to earn some good faith that they haven't really had in a while. And they've had a lot of bad things happen. Concord, huge blip in history and a moment in time that I'm sure they wish they could erase, but they can't. This marathon stuff, it's not looking good. Stealing, the assets and concepts from another artist and not giving them credit, and getting caught and now trying to retroactively, bandage and fix the situation up. Bungie has not been seen in a good light recently, and it's looking like a flop of a purchase from PlayStation. Obviously, there's still time to correct course, and PlayStation can take more control and kind of do their own thing and maybe steer it back in the right direction. But you've got a lot of unpopular moves. This Fair Games live service initiative, everything with the live service initiative has not been viewed great. And now, you've had the, what is her name? Jade Raymond, I believe is her name. She just left the studio that she founded, supposedly after an external test revealed that Fair Games is not in the best spot. So I think this is an opportunity that they should really consider trying to build some good faith in. Obviously, it's not going to be a ton. Games you're still the first to raise it to $7 games. People are going to forget that, but people might say, hey, they're waiting out on their console prices. Like, why would I buy an Xbox Series X now when a PlayStation Pro is the same price or around the same price? It's not the same price, but it's not far off. So let's see what they do. They haven't officially done anything. Obviously, they're considering it, and it's in the works. And if I was a betting man, I would bet that they are going to do it, and not listen to somebody like me. But we'll see. One can hope. Some good news for them, though. Something that will build good faith in a little bit is the Stellar Blade Complete Edition is coming out on June 11th. All right, so why I had this down, Stellar Blade was one of the better games that I played last year. From the soundtrack, the combat, I do like Souls-like combat. I'm a newer Souls fan, but I do enjoy that combat. I do enjoy the difficulty to a degree and things like that. The parrying, kind of building different builds with your characters and stuff like that. So I'm happy to see this game is making its way to PC. So I don't think I noted that in the title, but part of it, the complete edition coming out on June 11th, is that it's coming out on PC. So, with that being said, Gooner season's about to be insane. I know that's as good as a game as it is. It's a great game. I love the game. Not a Gooner myself, but the mods that people are about to go crazy with on this, it's going to be kind of scary. I don't know. The scariest part is you don't even know what people are even thinking of doing. Because I feel like the game was already going crazy when it was just on PlayStation with the way people were talking about it, the way people were discussing the character and things like that. Not a healthy discourse. If you're chronically online like me, it's only going to get 100 times worse now that it's on PC and people can mod it and do different things too. And I wonder if measures have been taken to try to mitigate that, because the internet is probably going to be another moment in time with people modding it and showing off their mods and doing different things. So just have to note that as this release, because if you're anticipating this release or been waiting for this release on PC and you're a normal person, great. You might want to just stay off of Twitter and other places for like a good month or two when it first drops, just because some of the shit I think we're going to see is going to be absolutely insane. Moving away from that, a couple things noted that they talked about. It's not going to require a PSN account, which is a positive thing. I particularly don't have too much knowledge and experience with that, but I do remember the Helldivers 2 debacle with the, having to have a PSN account and some people not being able to play because of their region not allowing, PSN's not allowed in their region. And it still says that even though it's not going to require a PSN account, it's still blocked in 120 countries, which is an interesting thing. I wish if somebody understands the legalities and business behind that, I would appreciate kind of being caught up or being informed on that, because the PSN not being allowed in certain regions, I don't even know why that would be a thing to begin with. I'm sure there is a reason, and maybe a legitimate reason, but I just, in my head, I can't think of a reason why it's allowed in some places and not in others, and not allowed in 120 countries at that. That just seems like a very high number for different reasons. And I know it's not just PlayStation. I know Xbox has the same thing. I don't think it's as much, but I think they have a pretty good amount of regions that you can't access Xbox in either. And I've always wondered why that is the case. Maybe it's just a quick Google search to understand. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody mention the why, or if there's a legitimate reason why. But overall, very happy. More people are gonna get to play this game. Very much one of the better games that I played last year. I don't think it got recognition, but I don't think it got that shine that it probably should have gotten. So I'm interested to see, how the PC community and people that play, PC Master Race, I'm very interested to see how they, receive it and, handle the gameplay. And I'm sure the fidelity, it was a beautiful game on PlayStation for me. I'm sure the fidelity now on, the higher end PCs is going to be absolutely insane. And I would imagine that Shift Up is going to optimize it well, since they've had this time to really lock in on getting it set. So very, very interested to see how people receive that, and excited for them. Congratulations to them. They've done a good job. They have a hit on their hands. Hopefully they have an IP that they can keep building. And eventually, I'm sure, well, maybe that's another topic, but I was going to say maybe eventually they'll be able to, fund themselves and branch out, but that's related more to a topic that we'll talk about later on. Another general, this isn't really a story, but I just saw people talking about it. Well, I guess you could consider it a story. But people were discussing, how it's seeming like the press is not going to get their hands on Switch 2s early. So there was a leak going around about the possible specs of the Switch 2, or people getting their hands on it and having a full spec sheet of the capabilities and everything else and the details involved with the Switch 2. I didn't pull up those leaks. I'm not going to read them off, just because after seeing the conversation float around, not sure how credible it is or how, tangible any of the evidence is that people have. But I do think it was a good talking point to talk about the press not getting access to Switch 2, and maybe Nintendo kind of sending a message of where they view their Switch, and not allowing people with significant influence to grab, get a Switch early and steer the conversation one way or another. So one of the companies or influencers that people were talking about having, the specs, quote unquote, was Digital Foundry. Digital Foundry, they do a lot of great work, analyzing games, performance, fidelity, all that. That's not really my cup of tea, so I don't tune in that much. I do see the conversation around it just because I'm involved in, the gaming conversation in space, but I don't really care too much about fidelity and frames and all those different things. I'm more of a, is the game good? Will I enjoy it kind of guy? If it does look great, that's a bonus, but not what I'm dialed in on when I play a game. And it doesn't ruin the experience for me either. I'm not like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm losing 5 to 10 frames in this one part of the game. Like, how can they release it? Like, I don't really care too much. As long as the game isn't unplayable, I can pretty much rock with a lot of different things. But to this point, people were saying Digital Foundry, there's arguments of, do they have the correct specs? Are they just assuming? How legit is it? Are they going to be wrong? Are they creating FUD about different information about what the Switch can and can't do? And I think in just saying that conversation around something where we cannot confirm or deny the legitimacy of the specs that they supposedly have their hands on, I think that's the right decision from Nintendo. Just seeing that conversation around that. The Switch, I said it before last week, they sold, it's like over 150 million units of the first Switch. They don't need the opinions or the influence of prominent people in the gaming industry to make the Switch 2 a success, in my opinion. Obviously, those things are going to help when people get their hands on it and they speak highly, favorably of it, or if they really enjoy it or they like some of the features or they like some of the games, those things do help. But I think for the initial launch that the Switch 2 has, they don't really need any pre-build up or pre-hype from people getting their hands on it early. And I think this is something to note in general for other, not just Nintendo, but for other companies. If you have a product that you're confident in and it has enough hype built around it, I don't think you necessarily need to give people the early access to kind of build it up. I don't think those things are bad things. Respect to the people who do get their hands on things early and can review and kind of share their opinions and are doing it for the right reasons. They're sharing their honest opinion of the product or the game or whatever it is that they're reviewing. I enjoy watching those things. That is a goal of mine to one day hopefully be able to get, review copies or smaller things like that. Like, I'll be straightforward about that. Those things are cool, and it's exciting to hear, people talk about their experience and publishers, reaching out to them to, give them feedback on the game. With that, back to my overall point though, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's only necessary for maybe products people are on the fence about, games people are on the fence about, systems people are on the fence about. When there's uncertainty, I think that's when you see the real significant boost in having people review your product. If it's good, obviously everything comes down to your product has to be good. Whether people review it early, whether they don't, whether it just releases to people and people get their hands on it. At the end of the day, like, you still have to have something good in order to succeed. Like, you can't just kind of mask the problems by either not handing it out or giving it out early, And I do think people read into that stuff a little too much also, whether it's like, oh, they're not letting people drop the review embargo till like the day before or the day of, like the game must not be good or something like that. I think that can be the case, but I don't think that's necessarily it. But I like kind of Nintendo's approach with the Switch 2, because I do think Switch 2 is going to be a phenomenal product. Like, they've found something with the formula of the Switch. Is it going to be perfect? No. Are there going to be valid criticisms? Yes. But let people enjoy this moment, this hype, the build up. It's been building up for a long time. We've had rumors of the Switch 2 for, years at this point, and now we know it's releasing in a couple weeks from this point. Today's the May 18th. It's releasing like first week in June. So we're not far off of it. There's no need for people to have their hands on it early and start to diminish other people's hype because of things people may or may not even care about. So I think I bring this up just to say I think it's better off this way, and I like Nintendo's approach with it. And hopefully, it pays off or it goes in the way that they want. Because when everybody's getting it, they want, when everybody's, Switch 2s are getting shipped to their home, or everybody's going to GameStop to pick it up, and people are doing streams about it, and people are doing whole podcast segments about it, doing unboxings and like that. That culture of everybody experiencing it all in real time at the same time, and the excitement. Like I think that's going to be a big moment in time that we look back on positively, or at least I hope so. I want the launch to go well. I want people to enjoy. Like I want the Switch 2 to deliver on the product, and I think how they're doing it is going to add to that, and I'm excited to see it. I'm not going to get a Switch 2 day one, but I am excited to see it, and I don't think the discourse around them waiting to give it to the press is. I don't think that's a bad thing for them waiting to do that. So, all right, let's get to our achievement unlock this week. So for this week, and I've really liked these publishers for a while, but they've been killing the game. All right, Capcom. All right, Capcom announced its 8th consecutive year of record results and 12th consecutive year of operating profit growth. So kudos to them. Let me get some applause going for them too. They have been on a tear, and it's not a secret. Like I don't think anybody has not noticed what Capcom's been up to. I don't even play a ton of Capcom games, and I've always kind of kept my eye on them and be like, wow, they have found a formula and a system, and they're not deviating. Like they're just putting out good games, putting out quality remakes. The Resident Evil remakes I've seen. Resident Evil 4 remake was in the running for Game of the Year. Monster Hunter Wilds will probably be maybe not in the running for Game of the Year this year, but it's definitely going to win something, I would imagine. It's sold over 10 million copies in the first month. The Monster Hunter series as a whole has now sold over 120 million copies. And when I read it, I was like, holy shit, what? 120 million copies? I'm not sure how many games they have, but regardless, even if they have 12 Monster Hunter games, like that's still 10 million copies a piece, which is crazy that they've sold that many in that series. And then 120, you think that's crazy? The Resident Evil is 170 over all of their games. So, man, they have some. I know Monster Hunter and Resident Evil are all-time greats, but just to see those numbers on a paper like that, it's just like that really puts into perspective how strong and great those IPs are, and two, how they're really killing the game. And those numbers are only going to go up. I know there's been rumors of other Resident Evil remakes that are coming out. Monster Hunter Wilds, it just came out, this year. So it still has plenty of time to double or triple the amount of copies it's sold, taking that number from 120 to, 140, 150 overall for the series. So Capcom, hats off to y'all. I think people need to take note and kind of, follow, not in their footsteps, but look at how they're making decisions and putting games out, and kind of figure out where you can implement that in your systems. I know Capcom's not perfect. All right, Monster Hunter Wilds, I saw people talk about the performance issues, things like that. Those things definitely need to be addressed. They definitely need to work on. But I've also seen how people have really enjoyed that game and are going back to it. And it's only the beginning. As they add more monsters in there, as they have more events, like they're just going to continually provide content for people to come back to and get, hundreds, if not thousands of hours into that game over the next however long. I'm not sure how long Rise was out before Wilds, but I'm sure it's going to be another, 5-6 years at least before the next Monster Hunter comes out. So building on games that way, budgeting. It seems like they're budgeting games correctly. The games that they're releasing are hitting the metrics that they need to be, considered a success. They're not having to. I could be wrong. Don't quote me. I haven't seen a ton or at all about Capcom having to lay people off. I'm sure there is some. Just off the top of my head, they're not in the news like when we see Sony layoffs or Microsoft or things like that. So they're keeping people employed. They're making great games. They're even taking risks. What was that game? I cannot think of it. The dinosaur one, Exo Primal. They're taking risks on games like Exo Primal. Playing switching it up. Obviously, I don't know if Exo Primal wasn't a massive hit and maybe wasn't successful in their eyes. I'd have to look, but the way they're leveraging Monster Hunter, they're leveraging Resident Evil and things like that, I think is allowing them to take risks on game. I think Capcom also made that Kunitsugami game that was on Game Pass. The kind of like, it's not a tower builder, but it's kind of like a strategy game in that vein. So they're diversifying and trying different things and making different games. And you're not always going to hit on those, but I appreciate the effort. And eventually, I won't even say eventually, like at some point I feel like they are going to hit on either like a new IP or like an IP they haven't made in a while, and it's just going to keep bolstering their roster of games that they can make and that people will enjoy. And I think that's a good thing, especially right now. We talked about this a little bit on the Moocast, but with the corporate mindset behind making games or milking IPs, it can be a damper on gaming a little bit. Gaming, it's not in a bad spot in my opinion. I think there's a lot of great games. Honestly, sometimes I feel like there's too many good games to play. From starting back from 2023 to now, it's been a crazy run. If you look at the big scope of games that have released. With that being said, though, I still think the risk aversion mindset from some publishers, some companies is disappointing to see, and Capcom's approach has not been that way at all. They have really, leveraged their IPs the correct way to make different things, be successful, increase their operating income, increase their, record results, as they put it, 8th consecutive year of record results, while still making the games that they know are going to hit, the Resident Evils, the Monster Hunters of the worlds. It's Capcom Street Fighter, you got Street Fighter, and then you have your other games, like I said, you're taking risks on, so the Exo Primal, the Kunitsugamis, and others that are new, smaller experiences where, you're trying to dabble and find something new to build on. So kudos to Capcom. I do want to do at some point maybe like a deeper dive into Capcom's structure and just really how they've been successful, because I do think it's important to highlight those things and make it a point for others to not, like I said, not copy, but implement things here and there that can help you, because we want this whole space to be healthier. We don't want people to lose their jobs. We want to play new great games. Obviously, we love the mega hits and classic IPs. Like, those are always great to play and come back to, and we want new experiences like those. But we also want new things that we say, hey, Expedition 33, talk of the town right now. New experience, new IP, new teams. Like, we want more things like that, and it's well deserved in their efforts. And I think Capcom's approach to how they've done things so far could allow for others and other experiences just like that too. So again, applause to Capcom. Love to see it. Keep killing the game. At some point, I'm going to touch Monster Hunter Wilds. I don't know when, but I know that is a game I do want to get on. All the other guys. Most of everybody in Mook World has played that game except me. But I am going to hop on it. And for right now, the guys are telling me it's still good, because in previous Monster Hunters, there's been a ton of content that they've added in later in the game that they're expecting to be starting to roll out in this one too. Like some, I don't think they're called legendary monsters, but some bigger, more epic legendary monsters, things like that. So in one of those updates, I'm going to get in there and appreciate the greatness as well. All right. Speaking of more greatness, Arrowhead, they had a hit with Helldivers 2. All right. So this story has been centered around the focus for their next game. So Arrowhead says the next game will be self-funded and without PlayStation partnership. All right, so this is a quote that I jotted down. It says, the next game is 100% funded by ourselves, so we'll call 100% of those shots. According to the devs, there is no bad blood between them and Sony. We talked about it on the Moodcast, but I wanted to talk a little more about it just because I think it's such an interesting topic from a game that really caught people by surprise. Hinting back to our point about new experiences that people want to enjoy that you never know might take off. Helldivers 2, another example. I believe there's no bad blood to a certain degree. So there's no bad blood, and I believe Mateo made this point. There's no bad blood because of the success of the game. The success, it exceeded Sony's expectations. It exceeded Arrowhead's expectations. It did way better than either of them probably could have fathomed or imagined in their mind. They were having to buy more server space. People were maxing it out still with server capacity, and they were buying more, and it was getting maxed out. That was like a cycle of like at least 3 or 4 times where they were adding more server capacity, and it was still maxing out from the amount of people that were trying to play the game. I had my friend Rep, who was on the first episode. He's not even that big of, he's a gamer, but that's not something that typically would be on his radar. And even he heard about that and purchased it and was hitting me up about playing it. So that's how I know the reach and that impact of that game, that moment in time that game had. It was reaching people who I'm sure that was their first time playing a game like that or being in the vein like that, but everybody was all about, Super Earth and, protecting it. So that's why there's no bad blood. But I do think, at least from Arrowhead's side, there's a little, not animosity, but there's a little sour taste at how some decisions were probably made from PlayStation and the leadership higher up above them. The PSN account thing was a whole debacle. I think that got course corrected, not timely, but it got course corrected enough to where people went from, they were review bombing the game to fixing those reviews and everybody enjoying it. So I think this decision to be self-funded, one, is good. That's what they want. And I'm curious to see how they take that creative freedom and what different things that they do. I think the main one, the obvious one that would happen, it would be a release on Xbox for whatever game it is. Obviously, they noted that it's not like a Helldivers 3. It's going to be a smaller kind of new IP-ish game. But whatever it is, I would imagine that it's going to be multi-platform across everything. It's going to be on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. So now they don't have to leave, a market of people out that I'm sure PlayStation told them, like, hey, you're not putting that there. You're not developing for Xbox. We're funding this game. We're helping you publish it. We're, do your thing, but it's not going to Xbox. So that's one. And two, I would imagine maybe some of the war bonds are done well. I think most people have appreciated the way they do the war bonds. You buy the war bonds, they're not time sensitive. You can use them whenever. You can earn super credits in the game to purchase the war bonds. You don't have to spend the money. Obviously, it's a grind. Like, it's not, but for a lot of people that play the game, that's the only game that they've really played since it, released last year. Getting the super credits by playing the game has been a big boost, and they're able to, get the war bonds, and it gives them goals and things to kind of work towards after they've maxed out their characters and, hit the highest difficulty and, done all the missions. Like, it adds an element that adds replay value without having to spend additional money on the game. But I would imagine that maybe that live service element or the want to put the war bond in there was not totally their decision. I would think that was a higher up thing, with PlayStation and their live service, and that the live service model being their focus so far this initiation with Jim Ryan and Herman Hulst and all of them, that the live service aspect being that such a big focus. I would imagine that the war bond was more of a requirement rather than a want. They were just able to do it in a tasteful way that people like and don't view Helldivers negatively because of it. So I would say maybe a change to that. And then I also think, and I said this on the other pod too, but I'm really interested to see, how they flip maybe how they've done this game. They've done primarily multiplayer PvE-ish type games. And now maybe they have an opportunity to do like a single player IP or maybe a PvP multiplayer type game. Maybe this is allowing them to work in a genre or a type of game that PlayStation was not going to be as open to them doing if they needed the money to come from PlayStation to fund the game. You know what I mean? So I'm excited for them. I'm happy for them. I'm glad that Helldivers was such a success that they can, fund their own game now because of it. That's, again, not trying to harp back on the Capcom thing, but that's what we're talking about. You leverage your big successes to give you an opportunity to make smaller games that you can take risks on, right? They don't need money from PlayStation. They don't need money from anybody else that can influence the way their game's going. They successfully made enough money to fund this game, and they have total creative control over it. And hopefully, I can't knock anything that they've done. You see the work with Helldivers 2, and I know a lot of people enjoyed the first Helldivers. They clearly have the talent to produce hits and bangers. So now I'm very curious to see what they produce with complete control, from how they market the game, the type of game, decisions behind any microtransactions, things like that, who's able to play the game, the multi-platform strategy. There's a whole works of things that they just have control over now that I'm sure they either had to negotiate before and they might not have had control over at all. So this is very much a very good thing for them, and I'm excited to see it. And hopefully this is a trend in the other way too. So a trend in the gaming industry we've seen is, not that it's a bad thing, it's just noting it, but we've seen big entities, big companies, gobble up publishers, from Microsoft buying, Activision Blizzard. Not that that's a bad, I'm just saying, as pointing out. Embracer Group buying a bunch of studios and things like that, shutting it down. That is an actual bad example because they have not produced anything good from all of their purchases. But seeing it being the other way around, like, hey, we took money from PlayStation, we came up with a hit. Now we can do something where we have control over it. We don't need anybody else coming in here making a decision and things like that. We need more examples of that where the corporate influence is not as much over the creative influence that these developers and people that have the passion to make the game have. 'Cause I'm sure I would love to speak to a dev or somebody who's made games or in the works of making games, and obviously I'm sure they can't be truly transparent because I'm sure it maybe puts them in a negative light. Their job, obviously, you can't risk your livelihood. But to hear examples of, like, we really wanted this, and this, but we couldn't get it done because the people giving us the money were just like, nah, we really want you to put this microtransaction here. We want it to look this way. We really want to copy, what this game's trying to do, or the success of this game, and how it can, affect, or how they have to alter their creative vision to get the approval from somebody else who's funding your game. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that we can see more people with total control over their creativity. Another example, I think, is Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate. Everything that I've read or seen from their developers, or the head of Larian and things like that, is that they had complete control over what they wanted Baldur's Gate 3 to be. And I think that's a big reason why that game was what it was. Game of the year. I mean, the clips, what people were able to do in the D&D style games. I mean, people were doing all kinds of wild stuff. They were, trying to have relationships with all the characters. They were, killing people, bringing them back to life, and then having them be indebted to them. Like, I was reading all types of just wild stuff across the board that you can do in that game. And I think it speaks to, again, the developers, these people having the creative freedom and the confidence to make what they want and not have to fit into some mold of somebody else who's trying to just make a buck. So we need more of that. And I'm glad to highlight this story, because hopefully this can be a trend, going the other direction. People being able to say, hey, we don't need to be funded by somebody else. Like we've had this success, and now we can take the money that we had from this and start, taking risks and making more great experience for people to enjoy. So applause to Arrowhead. Excited to see what their next game is. After Helldivers 2, I'll probably just support it just because I enjoyed Helldivers 2. Like, it was a great time. I want to get back to it. Trying to find time, but I do want to get back to it at some point. But I'm definitely, you have a supporter in me, and I'm definitely going to check out the next game. So congrats again. All right. Rounding up the episode for this week. Gosh, when I talk, it doesn't feel like I'm talking that long. And I look down and it says, I've been going for 42 minutes. I feel like I've just been rambling 42 minutes nonstop. But there's rumors around in Mortal Kombat 1 development being wrapped up. So for those, I don't know if I mentioned it on here, for those that are listening or new to listening, I'm not good at fighting games, but I enjoy watching fighting games. Like watching people at Evo, watching, Tampa Never Sleeps, watching Sonic Fox and what they do on their YouTube channel, Rewind, things like that. I enjoy watching the fighting game scene a lot across Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Street Fighter. It's very entertaining to me, and it's almost like watching sports in a way. Seeing people do something at the highest level is exciting to me, and like seeing the crazy combos and the crazy moments, the pop-offs, people throwing chairs. Don't do that, by the way. Don't throw chairs and break lights, because you're going to lose your prize money, but it's still funny to see on my end. It makes it entertaining, but please, if you're somebody who's going to enter a tournament, don't do that shit. So I do want to talk about fighting games a little bit on this pod from time to time. So with all that being said, MK1 has announced a complete edition. I think it's actually released at the time of me recording this. And people who are heavy into the Mortal Kombat community and the Mortal Kombat creators are speculating that because they released this complete edition, it means that they're moving on from Mortal Kombat 1 and moving on to the next game, which is pretty fast considering the game. I think it's only been 2 years since it's released. So I know with MK11, I played MK11. I believe that was 6 years? No, 4 years, 5 years. I think it was around COVID time, maybe right before COVID time when I was playing it heavy. So at least four years, I want to say. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do agree that it does seem pretty quick that they're going to move on. And for those who don't know, Tekken its season 2 was like shambles of a patch. Like people were like, yo, what is this game? You said you were going to add more defense. You've added more moves. There's plus frames. People are not even be able to get a turn because of some of the plus frames and safe moves that you give in characters. Mighty Keith even made a skit about it. If you follow Mighty Keith, you watch his pretty funny skit. He was like, if you're always defending, They're always playing defense. It's more defense. It's Mortal Kombat though. After seeing the tech and stuff, Mortal Kombat was a game I saw people were saying was actually in a good state, and I don't think that was the case when it launched. I don't think it was bad, but I don't think it, like, right now people are saying like, no, it's kind of like the best it's been at, and I see a lot of people saying it's the best. It's in the best state of all of the big three in fighting games. So between them, Tekken, and Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat really is in the best space. This is from people who are more tuned in and tapped in than me. If you feel differently, please let me know. But I'm just telling you what the consensus of people I follow and have read and saw are saying. So you would think that maybe they would want to double down on the moment and be like, hey, what are some things that we can do to kind of maybe boost or get some people who are mainly just Street Fighter and taking people over to MK and kind of build it up more for longevity? But that doesn't seem to be the case. And people were speculating about what could possibly be the next game. And I need to get this creator's name for next time, but I saw maybe people were saying in Injustice 3, which, if that's the case, maybe people won't be that upset if MK kind of taps out a little early, just because I know Injustice is a big NetherRealms fighting game that people enjoy. I've watched, like I said, Sonic Fox and Rewind both compete against each other in Injustice, and the Injustice clips look crazy too between like some of the characters. The round structure isn't as entertaining to watch from the last one, like deleting somebody's health bar and then it not like resetting like a traditional fighting game. You win the round and then it resets your health. Like you have 2 bars, and then basically when the first one is gone, that's technically the round, and then wherever the other person is at, you kind of start in the same spot for the next round. I don't like, but the actual like fighting and gameplay has always looked good, and I think aesthetically it's a little more pleasing to watch the Mortal Kombat. I do think I like the combos and the brutalities and the fatalities and stuff better in Mortal Kombat, but I think the aesthetic of the actual fighting and combat and how people set up and do their combos and stuff, I do like a little bit better in Injustice. So I'm interested to see if more information will come out, whether they're done supporting MK or they're going to keep building it up. I've said this probably about 5 games now. Somebody can keep track. I'm probably never going to touch all these games. This is why I have the backlog problem that I have now. But I said I do want to get into Mortal Kombat, try to catch it on like a sale and start playing. I don't know when. This is just me saying it. I want to play everything, so let's just add this to the list as well. But I am curious to see kind of where Mortal Kombat goes from here, and if how much longer they keep supporting it if they are eventually moving on to Injustice 3. Because I do think it's a shame that with the game being in such a good state, to people who are playing it, to really shift your focus now when it's like, no, you should double down. You should, respect that people are saying your game is the best of the big 3. People are excited about, you've added, characters, from the Homelanders, the Omni-Mans, Conan, T-1000, the Terminator, like all those different things. I think they should really, really, really double down and keep the game going and keep supporting it, because I think people will appreciate it, and I think they could see a lot of like long-term success with it. But who knows? Who knows? All right, everybody. Thank you again listening in. 49 minutes, almost at the 50-minute mark. I'm going to try to. I'm working in the background to really hunker down on getting some guests. Rep is going to be somebody who I feel like could have on here, pretty regularly. So watch out for him being on here, but also just reaching out and getting people who are more in tune and tapped into the industry to learn, talking about topics and everything every week. I do enjoy it. Like, I enjoy gaming. So talking about this is very enjoyable for me. It doesn't feel like I'm going out of my way to have to do this each week. But I do want to get other people who are more knowledgeable than me and try to learn and help anybody who's listening learn more about the gaming industry as a whole, and how it works and how things are going in the background, how people kind of got to where they are and things like that, because those things are interesting to me too. So be on the lookout. We're gonna try and get some, maybe developer or industry specific people on here and just focus in on them and their experience too, to kind of diversify what we're talking about every week. But I appreciate everybody who's sticking around, and appreciate everybody who's been listening in. 4 episodes in, trying to be consistent as possible, and hopefully we keep it going and keep building this thing up. But thank you again for tuning in, and catch you on the next one. And remember,
Mook World is in full effect.
peace.